entertaining. Thank you. We're going to move on to the final straightforward presentation before we start going into roundtable discussions and hopefully open it up to a little bit more participation from the audience. So I'd like to introduce Dr. Jonathan Javitt, who was a former Wilmer resident and actually one of the first recipients of a K08, or at that time K11 award from the National Eye Institute. He's now the founder, director, and chief scientist of NRX Pharmaceuticals. And we asked Jonathan to join this panel to say a few words about approaches that ophthalmology departments can consider to help junior faculty and young clinician scientists secure additional funding opportunities. As we know, clinician scientists at early stages of their career are working really hard at a particularly vulnerable point where they have a lot of clinical demands. They need funding in order to protect their time and conduct their research. But K awards ultimately don't provide that much extra funding for the research itself. And without preliminary data or a track record in research, it can be challenging to secure the R grants that Akra was telling us about. So Dr. Javitt is going to tell us about one opportunity that he's been instrumental in founding here at Wilmer, something called the Rising Professorship Program. Oh, you're muted, Jonathan.
Okay, am I now sufficiently unmuted?
Yes, sir.
And we got slides up.
Nope, we just see it. There we go.
Good. So for those of you who are sort of scratching your heads, wondering why I might have something to say to people who are interested in an academic career and a K award, as Tom said kindly, I was actually the first person to bring a K award to the Wilmer Institute, and actually the first ophthalmologist to be awarded a K award by the National Eye Institute. And that's because of the extraordinary mentorship that I had, really starting as a medical student from Al Sommer and Harry Quigley. So the K award was written, the only thing, Tom, that you said more charitably than you might have wished is you accused me of having been a Wilmer resident. And I can't claim that particular distinction. I was a Wills resident, but I was a medical student briefly under Al Sommer. That's how I came to do the work with Dr. Venkataswamy on costs of saving sight in India. And that led to the lifelong relationship where we wrote the K Award together when I was still a Wills resident. So I got to Wilmer with the K Award in hand. And you never know what you're really going to wind up working on when you write this award, but Al ran into an old CDC buddy of his on an airplane, a guy named Marshall McBean, who had just gotten to Medicare in order to try to do epidemiology research on the Medicare billing database. Nobody had yet invented the word big data, but within 3 years, the National Eye Institute said, well, this is exciting stuff, so why don't you turn the K into an R01 early? So the K became an R01 after 3 years. And by the time we were through 5 years, United Healthcare came along and said, well, big data is going to be the next thing in healthcare. And I wound up as the first national medical director of Optum Insight. Back then it was called Ingenix, swearing that I was going to get back to clinical ophthalmology within 5 years. I said at the time, I'm not going to do this for more than 5 years. I want to get back to Wilmer. And I was on track to do that, except for 9/11/2001, which was a disruptor in my life. By 9/12/2001, I was part of the Bush administration, focusing exclusively on biodefense and national security. And that led to a gig with the Bush administration to stand up the Office of the National Coordinator for Health IT. And I never quite did get back to Wilmer full time, although, that ship hopefully hasn't sailed yet. But, in the process, I've always thought a lot about Wilmer's past, which is why we have the old domes in the foreground, and Wilmer's future. And if you take a look at the people who have been professors and chairmen of ophthalmology across the United States, more than half of them trained at the Wilmer Institute. And that began with a day where, somebody would call Dr. Momini and say, well, we're splitting our IENT department in half. We're hiring our first professor of ophthalmology. Who should it be? And Dr. Momini appointed the first generation of chairman of ophthalmology. There wasn't much of a search committee. But, those days are different. And, the question that Peter and I started noodling around was, how do we maintain an environment where, the Wilmer Institute continues to be the breeding ground, the incubator for the academic leaders of ophthalmology through the next century? And when I presented the rising professor concept to the Wilmer board, I talked to them about the parable that's quoted in the Jewish Talmud of a first century rabbi named Honi, who comes across an elderly woman planting a carob tree, and carob trees are known not to give fruit for 70 years. And Honi says, well, how can you possibly benefit from the fruit of this tree? You're not a young person, and this tree is not going to give fruit for 70 years. And the answer she gives is, I'm planting this tree for my grandchildren. Just as our grandparents planted for us, we really have to plant for those who are going to follow. And that's the whole idea behind the Wilmer Rising Professorship Program. And it's built around that simple proposition that, more leaders and chairpersons in ophthalmology have trained at Wilmer than any other institution. And part of that is because of a luxury that, I once benefited from, that if you spent, 2 days in the clinic and you didn't want to earn $1 million a year, you were very happy with an academic salary, those 2 days in the clinic would pay for 3 days in the lab. And of course, that's no longer true. And similarly, if you wrote a good R01 during your fellowship, you had a decent chance of getting it funded on the first or second round. But now the average age of first R01 is 45 years old. So maintaining that global leadership and giving the kind of people who are able to earn faculty slots at the Wilmer Institute the ability to turn themselves into global leader really needs some thought, some structure, and some resources. And that was the idea behind establishing this Rising Professorship Program. And the essence of the program is to provide resources, mentorship, but also structured education to incubate, nurture, and empower the next generation of leaders in ophthalmology. And that's, consists really of three things. One is the financial support that's needed to supplement a K award, because the K award these days, pretty much provides enough salary support to buy back a day, maybe a little more than a day a week of clinic time, but there's still a gap. The structured mentorship to ensure that the critical first 7 years is productive and goal-oriented. It feels like, when you finally get out of fellowship, you get your first year of faculty, it feels like those 7 years to get promoted is a long time. and there's lots of time to find your way. And the reality is those 7 years go at lightning speed. And at the end of those 7 years, you've either got the credentials to get promoted, or you're kind of behind the power curve. So the mentorship to ensure that every day of those 7 years gets used in the best possible way is critical. And then the third is to build a structured education program and leadership and management. And that's something we're still working on, but there's an active conversation with the Carey School of Business in developing a program that won't necessarily be tailored to empowering ophthalmology rising faculty to become investment bankers at JP Morgan, but rather will empower ophthalmology rising faculty to be somebody that a search committee would say that person is going to be able to build our department of ophthalmology. That person not only has the clinical skills and the academic skills, but has the management skills to lead. So the idea was to target people who are in their first or second year post-fellowship, people who have already demonstrated an ability to succeed in the research world, and having earned a K award is really a critical gating step, because the K award study sections are probably more charitably disposed to recognizing the potential of an applicant than any other study section within NIH. So convincing a K award study section that you've got the potential to be one of those future successful R01 grantees is a clear ability to demonstrate that ability. People who have a demonstrated commitment to advanced education. So one of the qualifications for rising professors is people who have earned an M.P.H, a Ph.D, who've demonstrated that that MD degree is not the end of their educational path, and then people who've demonstrated exceptional academic productivity. The people who published their first peer-reviewed paper as a medical student or first-year resident are probably more likely to be future leaders than people who do it much later. And that's sort of the program in a nutshell. The fact that this symposium is being organized by the first person in the Institute, Tom, to be recognized as a rising professor, and the things that Tom's already done with the rising professor resources afforded to him says a lot about the notion that we might be on track. And hopefully this is a concept and a program that's going to go broader than Wilmer. I see that there are other chairmen of ophthalmology joining us this morning. We've already had conversations with chairmen of other departments within Johns Hopkins who are interested in implementing this concept within their department. And to the extent that there's anybody who's joining us today who thinks I could be helpful in offering some thoughts about where they might take their early research, or how they might best position themselves to be somebody who winds up as a rising professor, all of my contact information is on my JH, and I'm easy to find. Right now, I'm living in between, on an island in between Miami and Miami Beach, and happy to spend time with any of you. So thank you so much for inviting me this morning and for opening the dialogue. And Harry, thank you for being one of the mentors who helped me write that first K award.